Hello, it's me Harley, back again for yet another video, and today I'm going to be talking about why there was no video for Halloween this year, even though I fully intended and planned to have one. In case you're new to the channel and you don't know me very well, I love ghost hunting, even though I'm a skeptic and I don't really believe in ghosts. However, when I tell you this story, you might ask me, how on earth can you not believe in ghosts after you experience that? I've been debating for a while on whether or not I'm actually going to do this video, because I know full well when I tell people what I experienced, they ain't gonna believe me. Not in the slightest. I am gonna sound like an absolutely mental lunatic who's just making things up, and even the people who I'm closest to would probably doubt that things happened exactly as I'm about to explain them. But I promise you, this is not just storytime drama. I am not exaggerating things. This all genuinely happened to me, and as much as my logical and rational mind wants to, it cannot come up with an explanation as to why these events occurred. Anyway, I'll begin. I'll start off by telling you what I had planned. You might know, if you've been seeing a couple of my videos on my channel before, that I have done ghost hunting before, as I mentioned earlier, and I have filmed quite large chunks of it for YouTube. And that's what I intended to do this year. So me and my mum were booked in to go and do ghost hunting at the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham. Now then, this is a very old historic place of judgment. History goes back further than the building that we see today dates. We know that people have been judged there and sentenced there from before the building existed. So, pretty historic bit of land, let's put it that way. It even has, like, traces back to the Roman era. So we are talking about 2,000 years worth of history just in that one small area. And in that time, the Galleries of Justice have held some of the most violent and obnoxious and disgusting criminals you could have come across. It's also held quite small offenders and probably people who didn't deserve the treatment they were given. However, there were definitely people who were imprisoned there who were very rightfully so imprisoned there. This seemed like a great place for me to go for ghost hunting. There are numerous reports of paranormal experiences, and I wanted to get in on that. I wanted my piece of Nottingham Galleries of Justice action. So that's what I did. Me and my mum were booked in for Halloween. I'd not been with this company before, but generally, as rule of thumbs, most ghost hunting groups are like one big group split up into maybe 2, 3, possibly even 4 smaller groups. And in those smaller groups, you usually have between 6 to 10 people in a group. That's what happened. I was in group 4, and there were 4 separate parts to the night, with a break in the middle. So 2 parts, break, then 2 parts. The first part was in the dungeons. Something did happen there. There was a little bit of paranormal experience, but I didn't film much of it because it wasn't that exciting. And for me, it didn't really show much intelligent interaction. It could have just been faulty, technology going off. And that was a REM pod that was put into the doorway of the dungeon. For the first few minutes, didn't go off. Then it went off. Continuously. Did not stop. It was giving everybody tinnitus because it was just this high-pitched squealing constantly. And I thought, even though we saw both before and after that it wasn't just continuously going because it was turned on and it was faulty. It didn't have any real interaction with us. When we tried to ask it to step back to prove it existed, or if something was there making it go off, it didn't do so. And there was no intelligent reaction with it whatsoever. So I decided just to really forget about that footage. I thought I'll put it aside, maybe put a bit of it in later for the video, but generally speaking, I'm gonna just keep that down a bit. Just as we were leaving and I'd stopped filming, a music box, you know, the sensor music box that you see in other paranormal videos, went off. Only for a short amount of time, only a small couple of tinkles on the music box. That was all that happened in the dungeons. There wasn't a lot of activity there whatsoever. I wasn't disappointed. Sometimes in ghosts hunting and things like that, you have slow starts. Sometimes you don't get anything at all. So I was still pretty optimistic for the rest of the night. But we then went off to part 2, which I believe was like the laundry areas of the Galleries of Justice, where all the like inmates' laundry would be done if and when it did get done. And we communicated with a couple of spirits briefly by using a table with yes and no written at either end of it, and a glass. Now then, it wasn't table tipping and it wasn't quite a Ouija board this, it was just glass movements to try and get yes or no answers. We talked briefly with 2 members of staff that had worked there, apparently. Now, I'm a skeptic, so I'm not 100% convinced, but we were getting a little bit of a communication going through. But then, another member of the team I was in, like, I think it was a family friend, but very close family friend, got in contact with her. And so I didn't want to film that and put that on YouTube. That was a very personal experience to her. I still don't know whether I believe it or not, because a couple of the questions she didn't really know the answers to, and it wasn't very clear, but she believed she was talking to a loved one. So I wasn't going to film that on YouTube and publish it, because that's very personal to her. So that's why there wasn't really very much footage whatsoever for the first half of the ghost hunt. And during the break, when we were waiting, having a bit of a relax before going into the second half, it was at this point I thought, well, if there's not much going on in the third part and we have another pretty quiet situation, then I'm gonna stop filming. I don't need to, like, I'll just leave it this year because it's not that exciting and I didn't want to put that on YouTube. We went to the third part, which was in the actual courthouse area. This was with Ouija boards though this time. The person who had been communicating with the member of the team came back and talked through the Ouija board. So we didn't get any footage with that again, because yet again it was a personal experience and I didn't want to film that for YouTube. I didn't want to show that person's experience, essentially. So at this point I'd completely given up. There was only one more part to the ghost hunt. It'd been pretty quiet the entire night. Nothing much really to film, so I'd given up filming. Also at this point my mum was feeling really rather rough. In the end, she's been pretty ill and has been in hospital twice for 2 minor surgeries. So she wasn't feeling her best. And we were going on to the last part. And in the last part, it was 2 cells. One was the condemned cell, one was a larger cell. And in the larger cell, there was a step that my mum could sit on and just sit and watch and, like, stay out of the situation. I'll give you a bit of a background as to, like, the situation that I was going into with this whole thing. It was 2 girls, 1 man, and me, who were doing the table tipping in that room. There were 2 cat balls by the side of a wall, and 2 cat balls on a table, which also had, it was only a small table that had a couple of like metal jugs on it. And then there was the table tipping table. Now, this wasn't a ridiculously light or flimsy table. It also wasn't a smart table that could somehow be electronically moved around or anything like that. There were no strings attached to it, and it was just a standard, normal table. This cell was very small. It was the condemned cell, so people would literally spend the last few hours of their life in there before they got executed. So this is the cell where the most evil people would have been kept before their execution. The cat balls, they are light up ones. So if you tap them, they will put disco lights everywhere, flash, make colours go all over the place. The 4 of us went in to do the table tipping. And we started off with 2 fingers each on the table. And quite quickly we were getting pretty solid results. It was starting to really rather move and tip and move and tip. And with 2 fingers on the table, potentially, I was thinking, could be 1 or 2 members of the group, even if it's not intentionally, moving it. So I wasn't massively convinced, although it was pretty interesting to see. However, I noticed that it seemed to respond best to my questions, or rather, it seemed to respond most aggressively to my questions. So at this point, I went to this, we'll call it a spirit for the time being, because as I said, I'm a skeptic. I don't know what I was talking to or if I was talking to anything. But I interacted with it as if it was a person. So from now on, I'll be talking to it and speaking about it as if it was a person, because I think that's the best way to get results. You wouldn't want to be talked to like a robot. If somebody was trying to communicate with you, you'd want to be spoken to like a human. I addressed it and went, "You don't like me, do you?" And then it started getting really angry, like to the point where legs were lifting off the floor. And I said, "You really don't like me. I'm not scared of you. Try and scare me." At this point, it was lifting up and shaking. And the rest of the group, we all decided we were only going to put 1 singular finger each on this table now. We placed our fingers on the table, and it was still having these giant movements, like lifting up onto 1 leg, 3 legs in the air. Now then, we haven't like super glued our fingers to the table. It was being lifted up from underneath somehow. And at this point, the cat lights started going off. All 4 around the room started going off. So it was actually quite bright in there. It wasn't even dark and gloomy. The cat balls, all 4 of them, were giving off so much light. We could see that none of us had our hands under the table or were like shaking it around. We all had our fingers lightly on the table, and at certain points, each of us had our finger off the table because it was shaking so much our fingers would come off. I can't explain why it was having that kind of reaction. As I said, it wasn't a ridiculously light table. Granted, it wasn't a solid oak one, but it still was a hardwood table. And at this point, I'm seeing a good reaction with this ghost. So I'm really winding him up now. I'm not scared of you. Prove to me, like, this isn't good enough. Scare me. Show me you're a real hard criminal who can fight me. Make it move. Prove to me you're real. And it's at this point, the table flings itself between 2 of the girls who are there, across the room, and lands on its side against the cell wall. During this process, as it's been building up and I've been winding up the ghost and getting rather elevated myself, one of the event conductors, one of the people who was bringing the equipment and showing people around for the event, had come up to the door and was watching the door. And he said, I've not seen a reaction this strong in ages. I've seen people like have reactions like this but with more than one finger on a table each. I've not seen people have this strong reaction with only one finger per person on the table, and I've not seen it like lift the way that has happened. He then goes, how would you feel about doing it again, but this time with the cell door closed? Now, I was all for it. I was dropping things. No, I was so hyped. I was so down for having the cell door closed. So was the guy in the room with me. The two girls in the room, they noped out. They were like, no, I'm not doing that. If you close that door, I'm leaving. I'm not taking part in that. So they left to let me and the guy be by ourselves, one finger on the table each, trying to communicate with this ghost again. Now, they could hear me outside. My mum could hear me in the cell next door, and she thought it was funny. But I hadn't got my phone or camera or anything to film this with, because that was with my mum in the other room. So it's just me and this guy in the room now, with our fingers on the table. I start communicating with him again. This ghost then starts moving the table. The cat balls again start going off. Really, really bright again. I can see that the only other person in this room has one singular finger lightly pressed on the table. And this table is rocking up onto like one leg. And I can't explain how it happened. It was literally horror movie, kind of like rubbish. But if you saw on TV, you'd go, no, that wasn't real. That wasn't real. That was fake. That's like special effects. I don't know how it happened. Like, I'm trying to think of every law of physics to explain, like, how it managed to move in that manner. There had to be something pushing up from underneath, but there was nothing there because I could see it. And I could feel under it. There was no strings. It was just nothing. It was just a table. And we had one finger on it each. That, like, it doesn't matter if it's the strongest super glue in the world. It wouldn't lift up the table in the same way. And even if somebody had glued their finger to the table, they wouldn't have been able to remove it easily afterwards. And the finger wouldn't be moving around on the surface of the table because it can't keep up and can't keep it in exactly the same place because the table's moving so much. So it didn't freak me out. I was enjoying it, but I was having a whale of a time taunting this ghost, going, yeah, you're a big scary criminal, are you? Try and scare me. You're not doing it. Like, throw something at me. Oh yeah, you're throwing the table towards me. Oh yeah, I'm so scared. Not, come on, fight me. At which point, the table again flings itself across the room, this time with greater force than it was when there were 4 people in the room, and lands, not on its side, upside down. It literally does a 180 across the room and lands with its legs in the air. I am so hyped. Like, I'm just so happy. And I say to this ghost, throw one of the cat balls at me. Come on, you can do it. You've just thrown a table across the room. Throw one of the cat balls at me. Prove to me you're real. Prove to me you're real by doing that. If you do that, I'll believe in you. But I'm not scared of you. Come on, do it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I think if it had thrown a cat ball at me, I would have believed it. I even challenged it to throw the metal jugs that were on the table at me. I said, throw metal jug then. Throw anything that's on that table at me and I'll believe in you. Unfortunately, it didn't. I now, in hindsight, regret not asking for a few minutes alone in that cell. Because when I was talking to a couple of the other people who had been in there earlier in the day, they said they again had pretty strong reactions, but only when the men had left the room. When it was the girls only trying to talk and communicate with the spirit, they got reactions. As soon as the men came back into the room, it would go silent, stop working. So, as it was just me and the other gentleman in the room, I kind of think it might have been, if it was a spirit, he might have been holding back a bit. Now then, I so wish I had been in there by myself, because if I'd been in there by myself, it's possible, if the spirit was holding back because there was a man in the room, they might have thrown a cat ball at me, and I would 100% believe, well, maybe not 100%, I'd probably like 90% believe in ghosts if that happened. But unfortunately, it didn't. As I said, it sounds like absolute rubbish. Anybody listening to it would be like, you've watched way too much horror movies. This is like not happening. This didn't happen. But I know it did. And at some point in the future, I do want to go back. And if I go back, I am definitely filming while I'm in that cell. And if I go back, I will be asking to be in that cell by myself for a few minutes. Even if it's have a break time when like everybody's relaxing, I'm going to say, can I be in that cell by myself? Because that is the closest I have ever come to actually believing in ghosts. I've got a couple of other ghost stories I've not talked about on YouTube because I don't think people will believe them. But this one I was just so excited about and so hyped that I just couldn't resist making a video about it, even though I know people are just gonna not believe it. Oh gosh, I love it. That ghost did not like me. Like, it was giving me that strong reaction, even though there was a man in the room with me and a man watching in from outside. That didn't happen with any of the other guests, because the other guests said it only worked when it was just the girls in there. If that's the reaction I got, if I wound up that ghost so much with men in the room, just imagine what I could do to it by myself. Oh, I can really imitate the hell out of a spirit. I love that idea. I'm not scared of them. Like, you can't do anything to me. Well, you could throw something at me. I know some people are like, all scared of like being possessed and things, but to be honest with you, if it got to that stage where I was risking myself getting possessed, at least I'd then believe in the ghosts, so then I'd actually be like, yeah, I believe in them now, I believe in an afterlife. I'd risk that just to prove to myself that an afterlife existed. So at least that's how I think about it. On that note, I'm going to wrap it up because I could talk about this for ages and ages and just think and try and come up with some kind of explanation, because in the past when I've had like spooky experiences and ghost experiences, I've like been able to come up with an explanation. I just can't here. I can't. So I'm going to say toodle pip or beans and see you in the next video, which hopefully will be quite soon. So bye.